Hello readers, I'm Amy. Here's Amadeus, who is only joining me because he wants food. He'll get fed in a few minutes. This is the info dump tag. I was tagged by Victoria from what Victoria read. I'll go ahead and include the original creator down below. I have changed up my filming spot a little bit. I mean, I haven't changed up the spot. I'm usually over in this corner. I moved it out because this tag includes kind of showing organization, and I feel like it's easier if I'm sitting in the middle of my library so I can show you everything. So stay tuned for that, because there's so many little parts of my library in this new house that I don't think you've really seen yet, because this just has kind of become my filming corner. So let's go ahead and get started with this. How many books on average do you read per month? So last year in total, I read, I think, 109 books, and probably 70 or 80 the year before that. I've definitely increased my reading as time has gone on. I think a lot of that is due to reading like novellas. Lately I've read some graphic novels that are pretty short. In general, my reading could be anywhere from 5 books in a month to about 17 or 18. That is like a huge variation from month to month, but it depends. Is it finals at school? Am I feeling depressed in that particular time period? Am I doing a readathon in that particular time period? Like, am I in a slump? Am I not in a slump? There's just so many things that go into how many books I actually end up getting done. And then if I'm reading a nonfiction, I'll probably read that a little slower than I would a fiction. Or if it's a 500 or 600 page fantasy book or Stephen King book, that might take me a little longer. Or maybe I'm really enjoying it and I finish it in 2 days, but I'm slow on reading a novella that I really want to soak in. Anywhere from 5 to 18 in a month is, I think, about what I would read. I would say on average, I mean, I'm not going to do the average of that in my head because I don't remember how to make an average, but I'd say about 10 books a month, roughly, is generally what I'm able to achieve if I'm not like too busy, but I'm still making sure I get work done and stuff. Also, the amount that I'm reading kind of depends on how much I'm procrastinating, because reading is not only a very much loved hobby of mine, it's also a way of procrastinating on everything else I'm supposed to do. Next question, how many books are on your TBR? Well, TBR shelf right here. That shelf, I counted 34 TBR books on that shelf. I took off 2. One is a writing book, like a journal, and one of them is my husband's book. I also have a book on here that I've loaned out, so that'll be 35 books on my physical TBR. And then Audible, I have a couple. So on Audible, I have Kill Creek by Scott Thomas. That's a haunted house book that I want to try. I recently found a haunted house book that I actually like. So hopefully I enjoy this one too. I like the idea of haunted houses. They just haven't really worked for me as a story for whatever reason. This Telling by Cheryl Strayed I actually got on Kindle Unlimited, and I think it came with an Audible reading. And I also got The Queen's Gambit on here because I watched that whole series, and it was definitely interesting. So I'm like, hey, the book! It's available. I'll go ahead and get myself some of that. Whenever I want something on Audible, I just ask my husband if he's willing to let me steal some of his credits, because he listens to audiobooks more than anything else. On Kindle, I supposedly have a sample of the Final Girl support group because I pre-ordered it on Amazon, but every time I click on the sample, it says it's not available. But I'm sure it's going to allow me, I guess, to read ahead of the publishing date a little bit or something. I'm not actually quite sure how those pre-order samples work. Let me know if you know. And last book on my TBR is on Kindle, and it's The Story of Jane. This is a book on the history of abortion that I've been wanting to read for quite some time, and was able to get that on Kindle. So, yeah, what is that? 38 books on my TBR, I think, if I did the math right, which is better than I thought. I've unhauled a lot of books recently. I've been powering through, well, I guess I shouldn't say that. I've been getting through some of my physical TBR, but if you've watched my recent videos, you know that I've been reading a lot of library books, because my book buying ban has not stopped me from bringing in books one way or another. But it's not as bad as I would think. I was expecting like 60 or 70 books piled up. Like, if I really push myself, if I didn't check out a single book from the library from here on out, I could probably finish my entire TBR shelf within the year. Do I want to do that? No. My TBR shelf is for enjoying, not like, oh, this is a project I need to get rid of. Yeah. So, next question. How are your books organized on your shelves? I have like my main organization system, and then it's kind of changed depending on where we're living. Whenever we were in college, I had like one bookshelf and my husband had one bookshelf. I didn't own that many books, so it was just what I really loved was kind of put on there. If there was a series together, cool. If not, it was just kind of put on the shelf. I didn't have a color arrangement or anything. In our apartment downtown, in order to move there, I'd sold all of our bookshelves, and I didn't know how long we were going to be in the apartment. I didn't feel the need to get an organization system. So I took cardboard boxes and flipped them on their sides, and they were organized however they were initially packed in the box. The house that we just moved out of had my kind of standard organization system, which I pretty much continued with here. So I'll go ahead and turn you a little bit. This is my TBR shelf, roughly organized with fantasy and science fiction. Down here is mostly classics. This is nonfiction, and I've had some nonfiction carry over to my classics section, and then the rest of the books, I think they're largely contemporary books, are in this top corner here. And then, see if I can zoom in without totally ruining my focus. Ugh. Okay. Very top here, we have some I Love Lucy books, because Lucille Ball was my heart and soul in high school. Then these are my poetry books, mostly, well, actually they're all Rupi Kaur and Amanda Lovelace. Also, this green thing right here is the play that I was in 8th grade. I still have the script for that. These 3 books right here is the first copy I had of Pride and Prejudice, the first copy I had of Jurassic Park, and a personalized book that was created for me by a relative as a child. And like these books, besides the one that was created personally for me, the other 2 are just kind of torn to pieces, but I can't get myself to give them up because I love Pride and Prejudice and I love Jurassic Park, and those are my first copies, and even when they disintegrate into dust, I will probably keep them in an urn on my bookshelves. This whole corner of 4 shelves right here is nonfiction. I have largely animal science, memoirs. This is mostly like sex and feminism, and this is just kind of the leftovers. It leans towards some historical fiction and some historical nonfiction, so it's kind of a catch-all with the history stuff. And then if you go down, I have more nonfiction right here. That's more like general science, so I have like psychology, I have my Mary Roach books. This corner has Asimov and Michael Crichton, so that's science fiction. This bottom corner is all science fiction. A lot of that is my husband's science fiction, and some of it is mine as well. And then I have what's left of my Harry Potter books here. I gave one of each book that I have in the series to my mom because she wanted to reread them, and I wanted an excuse to get them off my shelves without having to totally give them up, because they are very sentimental to me, in spite of how awful J.K. Rowling has turned out. But I do have the illustrated editions of the first 4 books, and I still have my book 5 copy, my husband's book 1 copy, because I've had a couple of duplicates. Then, on the end of the shelf here, we have, so if you've noticed, I made these bookshelves myself. I have sets of 4 on top of each other, and then I'll have a stack. And then over here I have sets of 4 and like another stack. So on the stack shelf here are Barnes & Noble books. If you hear that noise, my husband just came home. These are my Barnes & Noble classics, which I'm getting because Barnes & Noble classics are pretty affordable and they come in a bunch of colors. Let me close the door. Okay, anyways. Fairly affordable Barnes & Noble classics, organized by color, and also these ones up top here. I have like this section organized by color, and then the top is organized by color, but also however I could get them to fit. This second shelf is also classics. I mean, the whole stack is classics, but these are some nicer editions, like nice paperbacks that don't necessarily go together like my Barnes & Noble paperbacks. I'm going to be answering this question for a while because I love to talk about how my book's organized. These are some of my cloth-bound classics as well as like older paperback editions, and then I have like leather-bound editions right here, and then these are some more Barnes & Noble hardcover editions. I'll try and speed this up a little bit so we're not here forever. Now this stack right here in the corner, that is all Stephen King. First, it is organized by paperback and hardcover, also by series. All of the books that are in a series are in one shelf. And then from paperback and hardcover, they're organized by publishing date. Oldest books on the bottom, newest books on the top. My next set of 4 here is a little less organized than my other side, but I've got horror. I have my V.C. Andrews up here. I know V.C. Andrews is kind of a disturbing author, but I love her. I mean, I'm sure they call this the info dump book tag for a reason, so that's why we're taking so long. Alright, where was I? I had to pause the video for a second to feed my cat. Horror books are right there. Half of them are mine, half of them are my husband's. This is kind of a hodgepodge of contemporary. This shelf is more rainbow organized contemporary, and this is like my Jodi Picoult books, my Jeffrey Eugenides books. These are more collected authors. This over here is my dystopia, which I've considered moving over to science fiction, or in the science fiction section. We'll see how that changes as I get more books. These 3 shelves are fantasy, which is a huge extension from what used to be a single shelf of fantasy and YA combined, and then I had a fantasy shelf and a YA shelf, and now I'm actually branching out a little. Good for me. They're just organized. These 2 have series, and this is the shelf of standalones that I have, and then that is my YA shelf. So, is that I think that's all of my shelves, with the exception of my cookbook shelf in the kitchen. Alright, now that we got that big question taken care of, I wonder how long this video is going to be. If it's too long, editing me is going to hate filming me. Alright, where were we? What genres do you read the most from? That depends entirely on mood. Generally, I feel like off the top of my head, I would say I read a lot of contemporary, but I think that's because a lot of books can be categorized as contemporary. If you have a fiction book that is some historical fiction, like in the past, but also some stuff current, that could kind of be a contemporary book. You have some dystopias that feel a little more recent and could be considered a contemporary book. A lot of the medical fiction that I used to love reading, I would classify as contemporary. A lot of the sexual assault books that I've read could classify as contemporary. So I feel like contemporary is just this huge umbrella genre, which is why I would say that I mostly read contemporary. But I've gotten really into horror in the last year or so. I feel like it's a way of coping with the, as someone else called it in a video I watched recently, coping with the panini that we are all in right now. Quite a few dystopias. I didn't used to like dystopias because I found them really depressing, but I find my niche of enjoyment in dystopias is women's dystopias specifically. So a lot of women's fiction in general I love. I read a lot of women's fiction. Nonfiction, I don't tend to read as much of. Last year I didn't read a lot of it, but this year, when I started off the year in a slump, what got me out of the slump, oddly enough, was nonfiction. So nonfiction is definitely something I go in phases with. Within nonfiction, I think I tend to mostly enjoy science and memoirs. I'm sure biographies and autobiographies would be interesting as well, but I love the personal touch of a memoir. Next question. Which genres do you own the most of? Technically horror because of Stephen King, but most of the Stephen King books, I just say that those are my husband's books because he was the one between the two of us who initially really loved Stephen King, so I've only collected a few of them for myself. Had to pause again to change my battery really quickly, so I guess we're just doing this video in sections. What was I talking about? Genres I own the most of. So Stephen King, technically, but like I said, most of those are my husband's books. I would say classics, but the interesting thing is I don't know that I've actually read that many classics. A lot of classics on this shelf I haven't read. I would actually say most of these classics I haven't read. I have the classics that I love, and then I have the classics that I think I should read that I haven't gotten around to reading yet. I'm wondering how much of ownership of classics is just because they're classics. Like, I don't actually read classics that often. When I was younger, I thought, oh, I just really love classics, or I'm going to love all the classics, or I need to read them because they're classics. But sometimes I look at my classics shelf and I'm like, how many of these am I gonna hate? How many of them should I get rid of? Like, will this whole classic stack eventually just be half or even less of that shelf? Be interesting to find out. I have my week-long reading projects that were inspired by Books with Emily Fox. I think I need to do a couple of weeks, not all together, but a couple of weeks of just reading classics to get through some of these and see what I'm really going to like out of this. So that'll be interesting to see how that goes. Maybe I'll do like I keep getting video essay ideas recently, but video essays take a lot of work, so it's me having ideas and not actually making the videos for them. But it would be really interesting to do just a chatty video on classics and why we own them and why they're classics and why we feel we have to have the classics. I don't know. Thoughts down below if you want to hear more on this or if you have an opinion on this. Skipped a question. Which is your preferred form of reading, physical, audio, or ebook? I want to say physical. I mean, I feel like everyone loves reading physical, but honestly, I think it's because of how many books have checked out from the library in 2021, but at least half of the books that I have read since January 1st have been as ebooks. A lot of that, I think, has to do with my insomnia. I haven't really been sleeping that well, so I'll stay up awake in bed and I can read on my ebook without bothering my husband while he's sleeping, but I can still lay next to him and enjoy that togetherness time. So I've actually been enjoying ebooks lately, which is not something I ever thought I would really enjoy. I've liked audiobooks for a long while. I didn't used to be able to read them, but in the last couple of years I've really found the activities that are good for listening to ebooks. So I'll do some of my design work while listening to them. I'll do some cooking while listening to them. I really like the comfort of hearing something. So I have an appreciation for each of the ways of reading. I don't know that I necessarily have a preferred one. I would have said that ebooks were my least preferred, but my reading habits this year seem to say otherwise. Who is your most owned author? Stephen King, for sure, even though they're mostly my husband's books. I don't know that we even have half of the books that Stephen King has written, but, we only have so much shelf space for one author. Outside of Stephen King, besides Stephen King, I'm going to say Michael Crichton is going to be my next owned author, or most owned author, probably followed by J.K. Rowling and Mary Roach. J.K. Rowling because I collected the Harry Potter books for years. The ones at my parents' house are still technically mine. But Michael Crichton is one of my most owned authors. He was the very first science fiction author I ever read. I hated the Sci-Fi Channel because it freaked me out whenever I would see bits and pieces of it growing up. So my mom loved watching the Sci-Fi Channel, and every time I saw she was watching it, I would walk out of the room. But one day I was at Salvation Army with my grandparents, and I find a copy of the book Jurassic Park. Well, I always loved that. So it's like, oh, I didn't know it was a book, and I read it and just automatically fell in love. So I've been collecting Michael Crichton since then. That's a project that I want to do, either for this channel or for my design channel that I'm working on. I don't know which one yet, but I'm finding you have so many classic authors and so many sci-fi authors who have special editions of books. I have these special, like, purple and yellow editions of the Robot series from Isaac Asimov. But Michael Crichton doesn't have a special edition series yet, so I think it would be really awesome to design a bunch of book covers for a special collector's edition series. Like, that would be so much fun for me. But yeah, he got me into science fiction. I find him accessible without dumbing down the science, but I would still say he includes some pretty hard science in his books. But he also really balances that out with a lot of adventure and intrigue and some thriller things in there. So I will say Michael Crichton is my most owned author, since Stephen King is technically my husband's. Describe your favorite writing style. I don't know that I have a favorite style, but I have some unfavorite styles. I don't want you to be too flowery. If the writing is too old, too classic, then I really struggle with it. I also don't want it too simplistic. That's a big reason why I don't read a ton of YA, and I really don't read a lot of middle grade, is that for where the reading level is for middle graders and like junior high, young high school, I feel like most of their reading level is geared towards writing that is maybe a little more simplified, and that's just not a style I can usually get into. Like, I want a more complex sentence. This is like a huge generalization, but I'm talking about it to get my point across. Yeah, then there's like dry styles that don't really work that well. But writing style is such a personal thing. You don't really know if you're going to enjoy a writing style until you read it. And even some writing styles that I feel like I should hate, I've actually really enjoyed depending on the author who does it. So kind of a crapshoot there, honestly. What literary devices do you like or dislike? I actually have 2 videos on this, one on ones that I hate, one on ones that I love. I'll go ahead and link those up above or down below. Ones that I hate, I tend to really hate timelines, or not timelines, time travel, because time travel is so inconsistent from author to author and book to book. Everyone has a different set of rules for it. I especially don't really like whenever a character repeats the day. I don't like it in movies, I don't like it in books, because it just, to me, kind of feels like I'm reading the same content. Ones that I love, I've actually found recently I like enemies to lovers. It reminds me a lot of the dynamic that my husband and I have. We'll say things that may sound kind of horrible to each other, but it's like our own personal love language, if that makes any sense at all. I mean, we're fine. We have a healthy relationship, I swear. But that's a little bit of what I like and I don't like with tropes. So definitely check out my videos where I go more in depth on that. Which character archetypes do you enjoy? I feel like I can enjoy pretty much anything if it's done well. I tend to really appreciate villains and darker characters. It was really interesting to read the Poppy War series. I wouldn't say that I liked Ren as a character, because she made a lot of mistakes and a lot of really stupid decisions, I think. But the fact that her moral compass was so different from most characters that I'm used to reading, I actually really loved that. I like when a character goes darker, when a character has that kind of villain to them, and I don't want to say not like other characters, but they're not like other characters. I like seeing something dark that makes a character more interesting. Yeah, we'll just say that. I like characters that aren't like other characters. which sounds way worse than it is. What are your favorite book settings? I don't usually pay that much attention to settings. I might like something historical, I might like something modern, I might like something fantasy. When I think settings that I enjoy, though, I definitely am reminded of Daphne du Maurier because she does an amazing job with setting the stage for her books. Daphne du Maurier just takes this place that her book is in and just makes it creepy and makes you think of like what terrible things must have happened there. So the way she does her settings really stands out to me. Settings in general, I don't know that I really have a preference. And last one, what are your favorite romantic and plot tropes? So as I said previously, I'm actually really enjoying enemies to lovers, but I don't really read that much romance. That does seem to be changing lately because I read 2 of the 3 Brown sisters books. I've read the first 2 Heartstopper books, and I'm liking those. So as of right now, I don't really have a favorite besides enemies to lovers, but I might be finding my niche in those genres soon. If you're still here, leave a unicorn emoji down in the comments to let me know that you made it through this entire video. Because this is, I think by recording, I'm gonna have probably 30 minutes of footage, which I can maybe edit down to 20 minutes of video, maybe. But this is going to be a long one, so yes, please leave a unicorn emoji down below if you have made it to this final spot. And then make sure to please like, subscribe, and be my friend on social media. And check me out in my next video. Bye, friends.